Hi, I'm Steven with Futurelooks.com, and today we have a chance to check out one of ANTEC's brand new gaming cases. Now, if you're familiar with ANTEC, you know that they've been around for 25 years, but in the last couple years, gaming cases haven't been their thing. The new ANTEC 1100 is their first real stab back into that market. Let's check it out. Now, before we head inside the new ANTEC 1100, let's start with a around the world tour on the outside first. Starting with the front panel here at the top, you'll notice that there are two USB 3 ports denoted by the blue here and two USB 2.0 ports here. Right beside it, you'll see that in the silver here, there are two ports for your headphone and your mics. Now to the left and the right of this, there are two activity indicator lights. They're very small, so they're very hard to see. The front here is made with a mesh material that is actually quite durable, and there's three 5¼ bays up here. The bottom is well ventilated, and there's some huge intake vents to the left and the right of this panel. Now that we've covered the front panel, let's head on to the side panel. You'll notice right off the bat that gaming cases do have a side panel that's clear, and that's the reason why you want to do that is because you want to show off all the gear that you have inside. This particular case has a really nice quality side panel that is made of plexiglass, and in the middle of it you'll have a place where you can put two 120mm fans. It's already ventilated with the signature honeycomb ANTEC pattern, and you'll also notice too that there is actually a silicone grommet on the two opposite corners here, but there's also a fitting here and here that allows you to quickly match up the fans to the side panel so that you're not fishing around for where it needs to be. Now tucked away underneath the plexiglass panel is actually a fan filter. Now the way this is oriented allows you to remove the fan filter and clean it without ever removing your case from its location. At the top of the back of the case, you'll see that there's an area here where there's some fittings for fan control. We'll look at that a little bit more in a second once we get inside the case, and I'll explain that a little bit more to you. Directly below this area here, you'll see that there's one single 120mm fan. Now this particular fan is included, it's in the box, you'll get that as soon as you pick up the case from the retailers. Below the I/O ports here, there are a total of 9 expansion slots, and we'll get to why that's important in a second. Directly beside that are two fittings for water cooling in case you have an external water cooling solution. Directly below that is where you would place your power supply. On either side of the case, you'll notice that there are these thumb screws that are actually plastic on the outside, but metal on the inside. This is actually good for grip and for removing your case panels on the fly. Now that we're done with the back of the case, let's head on to the other side of the case, which is the back panel. The back panel is actually quite unique for a couple of reasons. Number one, you'll notice that the back panel is actually bowed out a little bit. Now the reason why this is important is because a lot of power supplies have very massive cables, and to hide those you need a lot of room behind the motherboard. This helps in facilitating cable management and keeping things tidy inside the case for better airflow. But speaking of airflow, you'll also notice something that's really unique, and that's the fact that there's actually a 120mm fitting for an additional 120mm fan. Now, that's important because 120mm fans are actually quite thick, so that kind of tells you how much space is right behind the back of this case. Now that we've gone 360 degrees around this case, let's head up top for a second here. At the very back of the case, up top, is a 200mm Fat Boy style fan. This fan is actually LED lit blue, but you can actually turn it off with the switch on the back panel. Directly on front of it, there's the power switch and the reset switch, which are actually flush with the top of the case. They look really nice. Now before we remove the side panels to show you what's inside the case, I'd like to show you a couple of things that are really cool about the front panel first. First of all, the front panel actually has a panel filter inside. This is really easily removable just by doing this. That makes it really easy to clean, so if you're anal about your fan filters and the dust bunnies, you can definitely clean this very easily. It also doesn't interfere with any of the front panel ports because it's completely autonomous. From there, we can see that the front panel ports are actually really well positioned in this kind of a strip here that's self-contained, but one of the things I wanted to point out right away for you is the fact that the headphone jack and the microphone jack are actually made of metal. On a lot of cases, they're plastic, so if for any of you that have ever broken one of these or have had one that's kind of malfunctioned or short-circuited, this is a very important feature that allows you to keep this case for a long, long time. The other thing that kind of goes with this is the fact that they've properly grounded this whole front panel connector area so that, in case you've got a headphone jack in there, you've jacked into your headphones and you've paid a lot of money for that sound card, you're not going to get a lot of the feedback or the hum that a lot of cases produce when it's not grounded properly. Since we've got the front panel off here, you can see that these 3 plates are breakaway, of course, for your 5¼ devices like your optical devices. But directly below that, you'll also see that there's 2 areas here, 2 fittings for 2 120mm fans. To take off the side panel, you need to remove the 2 thumb screws that we talked about a little bit earlier. Now they're really easy to take off because they're plastic coated on the outside so that your fingers aren't slipping even if they're slippery. The panel is actually fairly heavy, which means that the plexiglass is also fairly heavy on it. I'm going to put this down on the ground and let's head inside. Starting at the top of the drive base here, you'll notice that there's this handle lever system up here. Now what that does is when you insert one of the 5¼ devices into one of these bays, it'll lock down by simply pushing this device down. When you want to release your 5¼ device, you just pull on this handle and then you can pull it straight out. Directly below the 5¼ base, you'll notice that there's 2 spots for 2 2.5-inch devices that can be for SSDs or hard drives. It's a friction fit, so there's no screws required. And directly below that, there are 6 areas for 3.5-inch devices. All that is required to insert these is a set of drive rails, which are included in the box. Now that we're getting inside the main compartment of the case, you may recall that we mentioned earlier that there were 9 PCI expansion slots on this particular case, and the reason for that is because it supports an XL-ATX motherboard. So motherboards like the G1 Killer Assassin or even the EVGA SR2, which are humongous boards, should fit inside this case even though they are some of the biggest boards on the planet. Here we have this fan bus connector at the top of the case near the motherboard cutout. Now the reason why this is very unique is because this little device inside the case allows you to plug 4 mini 4-pin connectors into it and power it with a single 4-pin Molex connector. The reason why this is really cool is because now you can plug in 4 case fans into this one connector without cluttering up the rest of your case or taking away valuable motherboard fan headers. Now that we've had a really good look at the inside of the 1100 chassis, let's have a look at the back side of the chassis and show you what kind of cable management is behind the motherboard tray. Here's a closer look at what's inside the back of the motherboard tray panel. You can see here that there's the 120mm fitting again, but you'll also notice the generous amount of room that ANTEC has given for cable management. And in any gaming case where you have a lot of stuff inside, you're going to need all the room that you can to fit those cables inside the box here. The back panel of this case underneath the motherboard is very well considered for cable management. As you can see, there's 2 fingers worth of room in this case, allowing you to fit even the largest cables into the back of this case. You know, it's really great when the company listens to all the feedback that they get, and it's really clear that ANTEC listened to all the feedback from gamers and enthusiasts with the 1100. It's got great ventilation, it's got great build quality, it's also easy to build, and it's also got the plexiglass side window, which is synonymous with gamer cases. But most importantly, they've given us a gift. At $129, this is a fantastic value for a case that fits even the largest motherboards out on the market. So that's our look at the brand new ANTEC 1100. Be sure to subscribe to our channel, comment on this video, and rate it if you can. I'm Steven with Futurelooks.com, and thanks for watching. We will see you again. Take care.